Hello, everyone. I am Diego Espinosa, and you're listening to Media Lex Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM in Lexington, Kentucky. I am here once more with Councilmember of District 11th, Jennifer Reynolds.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be back.
Yes, I am very glad that you're here with us to talk to us about what's going on at the council.
Yes.
Yes, and let's start with I guess everybody know now that, you've made a very important announcement. Can you tell us what it is?
Yes. Just about 2 weeks ago, I made the announcement that I will not be running for reelection and that I also will not be running for another seat in the 2026 election cycle. That was a really, really hard decision for me to make. I thought that I was going to run for a council seat and just recently decided not to. I have absolutely loved serving on council the past 7 years, and it has been honestly my favorite thing I've ever done. I love my constituents and the people of Lexington, and it has been really a privilege. I realize that to be able to serve the city as an elected official, and there's just so many things I could say about why I've loved it. And I wanted to keep doing it, but I realized it wasn't going to be sustainable for me. We are part-time. Our charter says that we're part-time. We're paid part-time. But really, I think Lexington expects their council members to work full-time hours. I know my constituents would not reelect me if I only worked at 20 or 25 hours a week. That's for sure. And then, for those of us that don't have a spouse that can support us or who are not independently wealthy or, have a very flexible, high paying job or are retired, the average person, it just makes it really hard because you have to work another job. So for many years now, I've been working 2 jobs and really putting in about 70 hours a week. I started counting my hours, and while I love it, that's just not sustainable.
Yes, and that statement, which has been going around the news recently, has actually prompted another organization to do some sort of.
An assembly. So actually, Civic Lex was planning on working on this issue even way before my statement. Over the years, we haven't had a review of our charter. Our charter is like a book of rules that council has to follow. In other cities like Louisville, they don't have that, and they're allowed to make changes to the terms, to the salary, to the amount of districts they have without have going through this whole process. But we have to go through a process. The public has to call for changes, and then it has to be given to council to vote to put it on the ballot, and then it has to be a referendum on the ballot, and the actual public has to vote as to if they want the changes to the charter or not. So there haven't been a ton of charter reviews over the years just because it's a very big process. And so for the past several years, council's been saying it would be nice to have a review of the charter. And Civic Lex decided to do just that. So they're gathering an assembly of residents, and they're going to present some different options as to topics that might be changed. They're going to, I think, present both sides, and then let the residents decide what the top priorities of changes of our charter would be. And then they would give those to us to vote whether to put them on the ballot or not. So it's quite the process. And Civic Lex has done a fabulous job like they do with everything. And if you go to their website, civiclex.org, at the top, it has a place where it talks about the guide for the first civic assembly. It explains what a civic assembly is, and it also has a survey. So that survey was released the day after my statement. It was good timing. And so I have been overwhelmed with just so many wonderful comments and messages, and I'm so grateful for them. And I've been sending people that link to that survey because so many folks have said that's they think we should be full-time. And so I say, fill out that survey, give us your opinion, and Civic Lex is going to take that into consideration on the topics that they're going to work with the Civic Assembly. So, yeah, they've just done a fabulous job, Civic Lex has, and you can go on their website. Like I said, you can take the survey and you can give your feedback.
Yes, I think it's very important for everybody in Lexington to have their voices heard, and that's also what Radio Lex is for. Well, now Media Lex. I'm also wondering, I assume only American citizens, are able to do this.
I'm not sure in terms of the Civic Assembly is going to be a cross-section of representative of a cross-section of Lexingtonians. I'm not sure if you have to be a citizen to participate in the assembly or how that works. But in order to vote on our council rules that will be on the ballot, yes, you have to be a citizen.
All right. Well, let's talk about the Maxwell zone change.
Yes. So Wednesday was a big day for council. We had meetings the entire day, for different things. And then we had a zone change that started at 5 p.m. and ended at 11 p.m. So for the public that may not know, if a piece of property is zoned a certain way and the person who's going to buy it or who owns it wants to do something that does not comply with that zone, they have to ask for a zone change. The staff of the city planning department looks at their whole application, and then they make a detailed recommendation to our planning commission. Our planning commission is a group of volunteers that are professionals and know a lot about zoning and development. And they have a hearing. They listen. People can come and they can talk about the issue. So they have a whole hearing. They look at all of the evidence and the recommendation from the city staff. And then they vote whether or not that zone gets changed. So to give you an example, in this case, it was a block of East Maxwell Street that kind of is on the corner of Maxwell up to Rose Street. And the zone was zoned in such a way that it would not allow a large apartment complex. So the company that wanted to buy multiple properties, tear down some houses, and put a large apartment complex needed a zone change in order to do that. The staff recommended the zone change, and the planning commission voted 8-2 to pass it and have the zone change. Several people from the community came and spoke. The planning commission heard that. And the staff and the planning commission felt like it went with our comprehensive plan, that it went along with infill and redevelopment, that it was providing really important housing that we need. And so they both recommended it. Then the council member for that district has to put the zone change on the docket to be voted on with or without a public hearing. If they put it on without a public hearing, they're saying they're going with they're in agreement with the planning commission and they can go forward with the development. If they put it on with a hearing, then the council hears all the evidence on both sides, looks at the report from the staff, everything from the planning commission, hears from the developer, hears from the opposition, if there's opposition, and hears from the public, if there's people from the public, and then we have to decide what our vote is going to be. It is not very often that council overturns a planning commission vote. In this case, we heard from residents, we heard from people on both sides, and this was an extremely difficult decision for all of us, or most of us. And in the end, we voted 8 in favor of overturning the planning commission's decision and 7 not. So that meant that by 1 vote, we voted against the zone change. And like I said, that doesn't happen very often. For me personally, it was really difficult decision. I agonized over it. I believe that we need more housing. I get that. We had just voted on 2 zone changes without a hearing on Maxwell for 2 really large developments. And that's that big hole that you see on Maxwell. So we had already said, because those houses were dilapidated, we had already said, okay, here's a bunch of housing. And we felt like, or I felt like, I'll just speak for myself, I felt like it was really hard to just say, yeah, let's almost wipe out that whole, side of the road and build up. I think what people don't understand and what I said and kind of my statement about my vote is in Lexington, we want to preserve farmland. We say we want to keep the boundary. We say we want to infill. We say we need housing. We say we don't want to mess up our neighborhoods and we don't want to do this and we don't want to do that. And really, it doesn't work, especially for a city that's growing, a mid-sized city. You can't preserve everything all the time. You also don't want to rip up the fabric of your neighborhoods all the time. So it's a real difficult situation to be in. And sometimes we have to make those sacrifices and say we have to expand the boundary a little bit, or say we need to make some changes in our neighborhood a little bit. And it's hard to know how much, how far, when. Other cities, they rip stuff up all the time and build up. I think we've been pretty purposeful and we've been very mindful, but I don't know what the answer is. I just know that every zone change that I have ever been at over the past 7 years has felt impossible. It feels like you're making a possible decision. Give something the neighbors don't want, but provide the housing that we need, things that we need. So it was really painful. At the end of the day, I just felt like we had already done a lot on that street and that I knew my constituents didn't want it. And sometimes I vote with my constituents and I could have voted the other way, but I just felt like I knew they didn't want that. And so the reality is that particular property can be upzoned due to our bonus that we have for housing bonus, and they can build a 75-foot, I think, apartment complex and tear all those houses down. The property owners can without a zone change. So that vote isn't necessarily stopping a major change on that block.
So they wouldn't be able to make a bigger apartment complex.
They couldn't make one bigger than 5 stories. This one was going to be 8 stories, but they could make a 5-story apartment complex and rip those houses down without our permission.
So it is substantial still.
Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen, right? I don't know what the developer, if they're going to decide to do a smaller project, if they're just going to pull out completely, if another person will buy it, if those landlords will keep the houses the same way. I have no idea. And I think oftentimes people think that as elected officials, we have all this power and we can just keep things from happening. But if you own a property and the zone allows you to do certain things, I can't stop you from doing it. So I just found out about a building in my district and what it's zoned for. And it can be a lot of things people don't want, but they're allowed to do it in that zone. So sometimes we can stop things. Sometimes we can change things. And sometimes we can't.
Yeah. Let's move on because we have a very limited time. I mean, speaking of changes too, I know that you have been looking into getting a new government building.
Yes. Thank you for bringing up another controversial topic. So, I've been on council since 2019. And since then, council has had several discussions about a government center and looked seriously at having a new one multiple times. This past year, we kind of started looking at different options and not too long ago rolled out, I think the administration rolled out an explanation and all of that. And then now it's on our docket to vote on. I know some folks have been a little concerned about the timing. Really, what happens when you are dealing with property is you have to have negotiations, and you can't do all of that in the public because you can't negotiate pricing, and you can't do that in public. So that's one reason why, it hasn't been as public until more recently. What I really want to explain, because I think people feel like we shouldn't be spending this money on a government center right now, and we don't know what's happening tomorrow, and we have to be careful. And I hear that. I understand. But there is never a good time to have a new government center. There is never a good time to buy a house. There's always something. We don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. And in 5 years, we don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. And 7 years ago, we didn't know that we were going to have a pandemic, and we didn't know that we were going to go through all the things we went through. So the reason why I am supporting this is because I know that government center is falling apart. It is absolutely falling apart. And if you heard from our employees, and I'm not talking about high-level employees, I'm not talking about commissioners and the mayor, I'm talking about our employees that work in the building, which is, I think, almost 1,000, they will tell you that building is atrocious. And we had one employee say one time he walked into his office and there were swarms of horseflies everywhere. And I guess there were dead birds in his ceiling of his office. And they didn't even know how they got in there. There's been flooding issues. There's a lot going on there. So to help the public understand is we have $55 million in deferred maintenance on that building. That means that we have not spent $55 million that building needs to be a decent building. Plus, the garage that's attached, only one floor can be used because the rest is condemned, which would be another 30-something million to redo that. So that means that if we make the decision to stay in that building, we have to spend probably $80 million. I don't think that's what people understand or want. The other problem with that building is that it is not good for serving the public. We do not, like council, we don't have conference rooms that we can invite the public to just come in and have a meeting. We have offices, but we don't have a space for workshops that's big enough. We don't have a space for multiple people coming in. The second floor is not very accessible. It's hard for people to get up and down and in and out. So this new government center would not be starting from scratch and building a fancy building. No, it would be taking the building that's already there, redoing the inside, and then building next to it a first floor city hall that is accessible to everyone, that fits everyone. I mean, at some of these meetings this past week, not even everybody fits in the chamber. So a bigger chamber that's on the first floor with meeting space on the first floor that everybody can come in and out and have access to. So I know it's not popular to say that I am supporting that, but I do think we have the funds to continue to support our essential programs, to continue to pour into the community, to work on homelessness. I think we have enough money to do all of that. And our monthly amount that we would, yearly amount that we would be spending on this is really very low and not that much higher than what we're spending on the senior center right now.
Millions sound like a lot. But even if you do the math right now, because you said $80 million to completely maintain the old building against, I think it's like $60 million, like 30 millions that you have.
We have 30 million that we are talking about putting down, kind of like a down payment. It's a mixed way of doing it. So we'll kind of be putting money down to get our payment down. We'll be leasing it, and then eventually it will become ours. So in total, it's like 80-something million, but then with interest, it would be over 100 million. But if you think about the fact that it's a very reasonable payment because it's less than 1% of our general operating fund. And that's what I'm trying to explain to my constituents. I wouldn't vote for this if I thought it was frivolous, if I thought that it was not a good use of taxpayer money. But in my opinion, I feel like staying in that building is a very bad use of taxpayer money. So it's really been time to move for a long time. And there's always something that has prevented that. And I really think this is a good opportunity. And I know it's a hard sell, but I can tell you that we don't know what 2026 is going to hold, but we don't know what the next 10 years is going to hold either.
And before we go into actually, maybe we should be wrapping up this interview soon. But before we do that, can you tell me what's the process? What's the process going to be now for that vote to happen for the government building?
So last night we had the first reading. So every time we look at changing something, a resolution or an ordinance, we have to read it 2 times. That's the law. So it was on our docket last night. It was read once. And then we have a special council meeting on Tuesday, the 2nd. And that is when we will make the vote.
All right. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time that we have, unless you have something very quick to tell.
I think that's it. We did look at a possible putting a solar energy project on the city's Haley Pike landfill. There's some land surrounding the landfill and a landfill there. And so we did put on the docket to enter into a negotiation with Edalyn Renewable Social Impact Solar to put solar panels there. So we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, well, that's a subject for another interview. Well, thank you very much for being with us again, and I'll see you next month.
Thanks for having me. You can always find me at lexingtonky.gov/council-district 11-Jennifer-Reynolds or jreynolds at lexingtonky.gov.
Great. And don't forget, you're listening to Media Lex Radio, WLXU 93.9 LPFM in Lexington, Kentucky.